So, good evening, everybody. My name is Vidisha Sharma, and today I will be talking about extending avalanche and vector with UDFs to enable advanced ML model management. So, the agenda of my talk today will be divided into 4 sections, that is, knowing the basics, understanding the intuition, hands-on, and some upcoming features. So I will be explaining each of the sections a little bit about each of them, and then how we can go through the course. So knowing the basics. So what is a UDF? If we elaborate the term, it is simply as user-defined function. And if you go to the definition, it simply says that it allows database administrators and SQL users to extend database functionality with custom behavior, algorithms, and/or data types. So there are a number of mechanisms which fall under this umbrella, like SQL, PSQL, and then custom UDFs. That is, you write some code which is written in some language which is already there, which can extend the functionality of the database. So that is, the code could be written in any language like C, C++, Java, Python, and you can just extend the functionality. For now, in our product, that is for Actian Vector, Vector Edge, Avalanche, for now we have just 3 types of languages which are supported, that is SQL, Python, and JavaScript. And for now we have only scalar UTFs, that is, you are returning a single value based on the inputs. So I will give a very simple example as to how a UDF is built and how it is tested. So it's a three-step program. So in step 1, you create a simple UDF as sample. I take in A as an integer, and again the return type is an integer. My language is Python here, and I simply give us Python source code over here. The source code just does that if the input number, which is A, if it is greater than 10, it returns sorry, 1, and if it is less than 10, then it returns 0. So that is my simple UDF. I can even check it in my Python IDE, any IDE, like I can just write this down in my Jupyter notebook, and I can just check whether my syntax is correct or it is not correct. If it is correct, it is well good enough to go into my UDF function. Once that UDF is created, in step 2, I create a simple sample table with A as integers, give some input values into it like 1, 2, 11, and 12. And in step 3, I call my UDF. How do I call my UDF? I simply pass the name of the UDF, which is sample, and my input value from that table. So select A, sample A, as sample from sample test. And it gives me output as 1. It gives me 0 for all the values which are less than 10, and it gives me 1 when all the values are greater than 10. And that is what my UDF is doing there. So that is a simple exercise to explain how a UDF actually works. So since my whole topic is related to machine learning and its algorithms, I thought that I will give a little bit of overview of what machine learning is. So machine learning, as definition says, which is a very common definition, that mathematically intensive system that learns some task from its experience, and its performance become better with more experience. So to give an example, I can give you an example how it works. So suppose there is a newborn child in the home. Child does not know how to talk or how to speak, and the mother keeps on interacting with the child in her mother language or in mother tongue. So the child slowly and steadily starts understanding what the mother is saying, and the child starts responding. Over the time, as a child grows, the child starts speaking also. But initially the child does not speak the correct language. The child speaks wrong. Suppose the child says that I would like to eat food. I would like to eat milk, and then you correct the child that it is not eat milk but it is eat food. And then the child understands that what term is to be used with what kind of objects, and starts using it in the right manner. And when the child is ready to go to the elementary school, he's quite ready with the language. He knows how to speak, how to comprehend, how to use those words, how to use the syntax of that language or the semantics of the language. So he's ready with that. Likewise, in machine learning, the model is refined by its own experience and corrections over a period of time. So whatever you're trying to explain to the machine that this is what you have to learn, it slowly and steadily it learns that over a period of time with whatever algorithm we are giving to the machine. So that is a comparison between a real life and a machine learning. How, because all machine learning algorithms generally they are picked up with how the human's cognitive skills work. So, how the neurons are there in a human brain, and how that gets translated into a machine learning. So this is, again, if you see in my PPT, there is a very simple diagram between a traditional program and a machine learning program. In a traditional program, you just give in a data program and you expect some output. Like in the previous slide, we discussed that you would be giving a data such as A as input, and your program is simply to classify those integers values to 0 or 1. If it is greater than 10, then you classify it as 1. If it is less than 10, then you classify it as 0. That is the output you are expecting. But in case of machine learning, it is slightly different. You give in the data and you give in the output, and you get some program, which we call it as a model. And that model is created over a period of time. If you train it again and again with, and you tweak the parameters or the weights which are being passed into the program or the model, then you get the final model, which is the outcome of what you have, which you actually want, how good it is, and how well the program model should behave, and with what accuracy it should work. So machine learning is everywhere. I mean, you name it, it is there. So it is like in Facebook tagging, recommender system for Amazon, Netflix, email spamming. It could be seen in almost every domain of life. And why it is getting popular? Because of the increase in computational speed. The hardware is getting cheaper and cheaper, and all these machine learning programs, they need something which is which has some high computational speed, and all the algorithms, they are repetitive in nature. That is, they are iterative, they are recursive. You have to call them again and again, which needs some good speed and hardware. So that's why machine learning is picking up quite well. The algorithms were there since quite a time, but since the hardware and speed is getting cheap, that's why they are picking up quite fast. So my UDF is basically mostly based on logistic regression. Logistic regression is one of the algorithms which is used in machine learning to classify things, and that's why I would like to talk a little bit about logistic regression also. So logistic regression is a technique for classification into 2 or more classes. So for example, it is used to classify whether the email is a spam, or if the tumor is a malignant or it is non-malignant. So generally it is used when there are dependent variables are categorical, and independent variables could be of any type, like continuous values. Like for my example, I will be talking about ERIS database, which has three kind of classes, three kind of classes into it, and 150 data types. And these three classes can be divided into 1, 2, 3. You can define that class A means 1, class B means 2, and class 3 means 3. So means you can name that, you can identify them as categorical variables, whereas the input variables which you will be passing into the UDF, that is the sepal length, petal length, etc. They are continuous values. Continuous values means they can have values like 5.1, 6.1. So they are not discrete values, they are continuous. So such kind of values are needed for logistic regression. And logistic regression follows something which is there for linear regression, that is W0, which has a formula as W0 plus X1 W1 plus X2 W2 plus X3 W3 and so on, where X1, X2, X3 are the input values and W1, W2, W3 are the weights which are calculated by the machine or the model. And finally, we get some weights out of it, that when this equation is run over the model, we exactly get the answer which we are expecting. That is, in this case, what kind of flour it is, or what is the type of the variety of the flour. So logistic regression and linear regression, they are slightly different. They are not same. Logistic regression is built on top of linear regression. That is, there is a sigmoid function into it, which makes the difference. And why sigmoid function is there? Because it is used to handle the non-linearity of the function. So non-linearity what means that if you see the left hand side of my slide, there is a diagram which shows the difference between linear regression and logistic regression. So in case of linear regression, which is generally used for predicting like what would be the price of the stock after 2 days, or maybe what would be your marks in next exam, that kind of example can be handled by linear regression. Means it's a kind of prediction, it's kind of line which is going up. And in case of logistic regression, there is a kind of curve there. It's a S kind of curve there. And for such use cases, when some of the data which is above a certain number, here in this case, the example states that the number is above 0.5, which is 1.0, and the number when it is below 0.5, that is 0. So if you can see, all my data points in black are in just two kind of lines. One is at 1 and one is at 0. And everything needs to be identified in that fashion. So when the data is this type, I mean, it is divided into exactly two kind of sections, then this logistic regression comes into picture, and it is very handy because that is how it is classifying things. It simply gives you a S-curve, and you would easily know that what follows that, what data point is following that S-curve, and you can easily classify that. On the right hand side, I'm simply showing that what exactly the logistic regression is doing. So as I mentioned, that it has a function which has W0 plus X1 W1 plus X2 W2 plus X3 W3. So here W0 is the bias or the intercept, because it is following a line which is of equation y is equal to mx plus c. And the net input function, which is just an adder, which is just adding these functions over here as in the equation. And once you add that function, you pass it through the activation function, which is nothing but a sigmoid function. And what you will see from the sigmoid, when you pass it through the sigmoid function, you will get a non-linearity and you will get some kind of output. Now you would see whether that output is actually matching your classification or it is not matching your classification. If it is not matching your classification, you would tweak your weights again, and you would again send back to the same equation, that is W0 plus X1 W1 and so on, and you would again repeat the same exercise till you get the weights which are which gives you a right kind of classification. So it is iterative in nature. So this iteration can go maybe for 100, for 200, or for whatever numbers, till you exactly get the answer which you are expecting, or not exactly, to somewhat to the extent, maybe like 94%, 95% to what you are expecting. And once you're happy with your model, then you can simply put a step function into it, which would simply say that, okay, numbers above this comes to one class and numbers below this value comes to another class. And that is how the logistic regression works. Now, if I put the same thing into my UDF, so how that would be done. So how UDF can give machine learning advantage to vector, vector edge, and avalanche. So ML can be used for predictions and classification, as we discussed just now, and models are easily available, or the libraries are easily available in market, such as Spark, TensorFlow, and Scikit-learn. And these libraries are so good that we just give one line of code and the model is ready for us. Now our problem is how to deploy this model, where to deploy this model. There are many ways to deploy the model, but in our case we would be deploying the model directly into the database, and that gives us added advantage because once it is inside the database, it would be directly using X100 engine, and it would getting the speed of the X100 engine, which is already very fast, and we don't need to move data anywhere. So there is no data movement, everything is within the database, and therefore we would get the speed much more than if it is deployed anywhere else other than the database. So therefore model scan can be used to score directly data, score data directly within the database, and which gives it a very good added advantage, and that is why the UDFs is the way to go. So how I did that? So first of all, building the logistic regression model. So I have this is a simple code which is a very common code for when you use a scikit-learn. You simply get some data into your pandas and then make a model out of it. And once your model is ready, you can simply test it that how that model is working. Since here our aim is not to tweak the model or make the model run very good, I have simply used the very defaults which come with the logistic regression model in scikit-learn and simply created a model out of it. So here you see that a model is created with the input data, which are the 4 input values, 0 to 4. And since it is for IRIS database, IRIS data, it takes 4 input values and 1/5 one is to classify, and that is what I have done here in over here, that I have simply taken as X data as 0 to 4 first 4 values, and the Y data as the 5th value, which is to identify that if it is classifying correctly or not. And here simply splitting it to test and train to test whether my model is working correctly or not once I make the model with my test data. This line is one line of code which is creating my model. It is very simple, nothing's fancy over here. Now once my model is created, since I have 3 classes to classify. So far whatever we discussed was for 2 classes. Now we have to relate same thing into 3 classes. So we will follow one versus all model. What one versus all model does is that suppose we have 3 classes, as we can see here, it is triangle, rectangle, and a cross. And now we want to classify all 3 into separate classes. So what the model does is that first it will consider triangles in one class and rest all the data in another class. In second it would do is that it would select the rectangles in one class and circles would be all in another class. And then in third case, it would be circles in one class and crosses in the another class. So we would get 3 probabilities, or maybe the 3 way to express it, and whichever is the highest number, then we can pick up that, which tells us that the highest number has the best probability, or it is closest to where it should be, and that is how we pick it up. So how we do it exactly? So now once my model is ready with just one line of code which I had shown you, there are some libraries which are already available which can convert this model into either JavaScript function or the Python function. And since we have Actian, Vector, Vector-H, and Avalanche supports both JavaScript and Python, so what I have selected here is M2C-Gen. So there is another class such as sklearn-potter, which just transpiles the model to JavaScript, and this M2C-Gen, it simply transpiles the model to both JavaScript and Python. So I write one line of code, that is m2c.export to Python CLF. What it does is it simply translates my model or transpiles my model into a Python function. So over here, if you see, this is what I have get as an output. So if I explain the output a little bit over here, you can see that the first line is the intercept, The second line is the first input, that is sepal length, and then some weight which is calculated by the machine and which is the final weight which we have got here in the model. Then second input, which is the maybe the petal sepal petal width, and then petal width is multiplied with whatever weight is given there, calculated by the machine. And the third input over there with some weight, and likewise with the fourth input. And these ways we are getting 3 classes for each of the class. So this is the first input I'm getting here, or the first value which is getting collected, which tells me what would be the final value of that model. This gives the second value over here, and second value, and this gives the third value over here. So I'm doing this exercise 3 times with the same input value but different weights, which would tell me that what belongs to what class. So once I have that, then then I'm ready to make it into my UDF. So this is how I simply put that data into my that function into that UDF, and here it is put into the UDF. Now, since this library M2C-Gen was expecting some a single value as input, that is, it was expecting some varchar. So I did not want it to disrupt that thing over there, and I just wanted to use it as it is so that my work is minimized. I passed my values, all my values, as a string. Then within the UDF, I'm just breaking it into 4 values and then passing them into my input array. That is input 0, input 1, input 2, after converting into float. Once this value gives me this var 0 would give me 3 values into the array, suppose like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.3 has the highest number, which would tell me that okay, this is the class where it should go. So I simply apply that sigmoid over there, which is 1 over 1 plus math dot exponential over minus var value, whatever value I'm passing, or whatever the value of that first class is. And then whatever value I get out of it, I just check it which is the highest value over there. So suppose after applying my sigmoid, which just makes everything between 0 and 1, all the values, I get output as 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So the next line over here, it simply picks up the highest value in that array, and I just return that index which has the highest value, and that is my classification for the class. And this is how my final outcome of my UDF is there. So for the new data, I simply pass that value, and this will simply give me the output. I don't need to run it anywhere in some fancy place to get the output for the new data. And how do I call that? So this is the way I call my UDF. So I'm passing all the sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width, and I'm concatenating it into a string, passing it into my UDF. And once I concatenate into a string, pass it over here into my UDF, and the rest is all done by UDF. And I get final classification, what value goes to what class. So all of this can be found in GitHub, and there are more UDFs I've written here for JSON and JavaScript. This can be easily found over there, and you can easily contact me at vidishasharma.actin.com. Then the last section is the upcoming features. So the upcoming features is the number 1 is the containerized UDFs, and then containerized UDF, NumPy UDFs, and integration with MLflow. So containerized UDF. So containerized UDF means it is the ability to sandbox Python UDFs, facilitating tight control over Python access to critical system resources such as storage and network. So it means that we are getting some more secure UDF so that there is no leak or security breach. And if customer wants to run UDF in the production, then it is better to use these containerized UDF so that the security is intact. So it would work for both cloud and on-premise, and if you're using this containerized UDF, then we would give lots of libraries which would be pre-installed with these containers, and you would not need to install it on the basic ones on your own. And the need for the user to install Python, and all user uses the same version of Python. So this is one of the upcoming features. And next is NumPy UDF, which is one of my favorite features which is coming up. So it is a hybrid version of Python UDF that has native support for NumPy single dimensional arrays. So getting numeric data directly into NumPy arrays and bypassing Python object is very fast. So it has advantages over classes like SciPy and scikit-learn. And since if it is used with containerized UDF, then it would everything would come pre-installed. And the advantage of NumPy is that it handles vectors of data rather than tuples at a time. So the speed is very fast. It is much more than what Python list or a Python array would give you. So NumPy would be like vectorized kind of thing, and the speed would be like lightning speed. So even more fast to what we are discussing over here in my logistic regression. It would be even faster than that. So to explain a simple example, I have a k-mean here. So k-mean is one of the simplest and most popular unsupervised ML algorithm. So, and it identifies k numbers of centroids, then collects every data point to the nearest cluster while keeping the centroids as small as possible. So I'll quickly go over it, how I've done it. So the model is simple as I did it before. Using SciPy, I made the model, and then I converted my data points into an array and created clusters out of it, or maybe the three clusters, three centroids I'm getting. So these are the three centroids I'm getting for each of the class, and I'm dumping the data into a JSON and reading that from a JSON file. So once I have the three clusters, I'm just adding that into the cluster. I'm just adding that centroids and reading that from a JSON data, and I'm passing my data and adding it into a NumPy array over here, and then simply checking to what cluster my data point goes to. So this is a simple line of code over here, which is given by SciPy. I'm simply adding over there, and I'm returning the cluster in each case. And since I'm making use of a NumPy array over here, and therefore this would give me an added advantage or an added speed for my example. So we will be giving more example or documentation for this once this feature is available in the market. But as of now, I simply wanted to show that if you use a NumPy array, then the speed becomes even more fast, or it is even more better. And last but not the least is integration with MLflow. So MLflow is for managing the model life cycle. So when we will integrate our MLflow with Avalanche or Vector Edge, all these UDFs could be easily saved into that MLflow. So for now, how we are doing the model management, we can simply save the UDF into the database and then maybe override it, or maybe save a new UDF and then just compare the scoring of these UDFs, how they are working. If they are working good, then fair enough. If not, then we can write maybe more UDFs. But all this will be taken care with the MLflow, and we do not need to go into this kind of botheration. So MLflow is something which is coming up, and it will be a real good example of how we can manage our models. So finally, last but not the least, conclusion. So the attraction of on-database UDFs for MLSQL is ability to score data at breakneck speed. The model and data are in the same place, and the Python is one of the most used language for ML development. So it will be very easy to transition and manage Python, JavaScript model in database, scalar UDFs for batch scoring and near real-time scoring. So that is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much.